All right, welcome to the Rojas Report. We have a very special guest today, and that is Lou Elizondo, the former head of the Pentagon Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. I almost said Aerial. For some reason, I feel Aerial has a ring to it. I mess that up a lot. In fact, you may remember one time I mentioned that, and one of our former detractors thought that somehow it was some sort of official comment when it's not, but it is aerospace, right?
It is, Alejandro. Thank you very much for having me. I certainly appreciate it. Big thank you to your viewers as well.
Yeah, my pleasure. So great job on the show, Unidentified. Of course, it was on, we had the fifth episode that we're at on an 8-episode series. So 3 more to go. And I guess what I want to do is kind of talk about the past, the present, and a little bit about the future as well. And getting into the past, in my interview with Chris Mellon, he kind of shaped up how you and he had a strategy coming into this to take this package of essentially very credible information and to push that forward, along with using the media, Unidentified, as a vehicle to get this out there, to get the government to respond. Luckily, the Navy did, and then use that as a vehicle to demonstrate to the Senate, that this is a real deal, and to get them to also start inquiries, all of which has happened at breakneck speed.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think social engagement here is key, and the power, probably more than anybody, of social media. This is really a grassroots effort. You said something interesting about the past, the present, and the future, and I'm a firm believer that in order to know where you are today, you have to know where you've been, and in order to know where you're going, you need to know where you are now. So I do think it's important that we continue to build upon the initiatives and the momentum that we've already gained on this topic, this very important topic that has, until recently, and quite frankly, been relegated to discussions that are on the fringe. And I think it's incredible to see that this conversation is being elevated now to where it should be elevated to, right, as a very serious topic, a very serious conversation that involves all of us equally and yet differently, right? We all live on this planet together. We all live on this rock together. No one gets off alive, so to speak. So we're all stuck on this ball. So this topic affects us equally, but yet differently, because depending on our social backgrounds and philosophical backgrounds and theological leanings, it's going to mean something different to everybody. The person sitting in Congress receiving a briefing that's maybe assigned to the sissy is going to look at this topic fundamentally different than, let's say, an academic or a scientist or a philosopher or just average Jane and Joe sitting around the dinner table.
And when you say sissy, you mean the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence?
That's correct. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, the committee responsible for, if you will, the watchdog agency for Congress that oversees the entire intelligence community writ large.
And I mean, it does also kind of explain for people early on, once you guys had launched to the stars, there was some criticism that people didn't see a lot of movement going on publicly. However, as we've seen in the background, you guys were hustling. You guys were moving this football forward at that level with military leadership, people at the Hill, of course, which we saw on Unidentified. So, I mean, it seems as though a lot of your time at that point was taken up with this, getting that information out there, which is what you wanted to do in the first place while you were in the government.
Sure, I think public engagement is critical here, but and thank you for giving us credit for that. But to be honest with you, that credit has to be shared with everybody. When I say everybody, I mean folks like you. I mean your audience and your viewers, because if there wasn't an interest in this topic and a desire to take this topic and look at it the way I believe it deserves to be looked at, then you and I wouldn't be having this conversation. We wouldn't have made it past the first few months when TTSA got together and started engaging the public. So this has really been a team effort. The success that you're seeing now is not a one-sided success. It's not just because of us. And yes, to some degree, we also have to give credit to some of the skeptics out there, because skeptics are trying to engage this topic very much like other people, right? So you have believers on one side, then you have non-believers on the other side, and then you have the vast majority kind of in the middle that really don't know what to think about this topic. And so I think in order to have a productive conversation about this topic, we need everybody in the boat with us, everybody. And it's okay if people are skeptics. I think I've said before, for the record, I think healthy skepticism is important, as long as you don't allow your own personal bias to overshadow that that objectivity, right? And then I think it's okay. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to ask why and who and where. These are fundamental attributes of being human. So, anyways, I guess my point to all this is, thank you humbly for giving us some of the credit to that. But really, I think credit needs to go where credit is due, and that's really this is an awfully big ship we're on. There's a lot of people that are part of it, and it's a wonderful opportunity to get different perspectives.
Hmm. That's really cool to hear too, about your embracing skepticism and skeptics, because I agree. I like to be challenged in order to make sure that you're looking at all angles. And I think that it's frustrated some in the UFO community that you all give attention to skeptics, but at the same time, people like me appreciate it because it means you're open to constructive criticism.
Yeah, and you see it even on the television show, the History Channel's Unidentified Inside America's UFO Investigation. You see that we actually have skeptics actively on the program because we're trying to get all sides, all perspectives on this topic. It's, we're not trying to go out and convince the public of a preconceived narrative we already have. We are truly trying to walk hand in hand with the audience and have a conversation about this incredible enigma that is now recently finally been acknowledged as being, one, a reality, right? But two, something that probably deems additional research and insight. And I think skeptics play an important role here. I don't mind being there's a difference between being skeptical and being a skeptic by nature. If you are skeptical, that's okay. You are applying, I think, reason and objectivity to look at a topic. But if you are a skeptic by nature, that means then you kind of automatically reject any type of new data that's presented before you. So there's a fine line between being skeptical and being a skeptic. I tend to shy away from skeptics in particular because I'm not sure they're very objective, right? It's just like a true believer. No matter what you tell them, it's going to be hard for them to pivot from their narrative. So really our focus has been that whole majority in the middle there that really haven't had the luxury to really even think about the topic because they're busy with distractions such as, real distractions such as, this awful pandemic that's afflicting the world, COVID-19. You also have political issues. You have civil unrest. You've got a lot of things going on in the world right now that are demanding a tremendous amount of bandwidth from people. And so this is yet just another topic. And I think if this was any other time in our history, you might see more people talking about it. But there's so much right now on the dinner plate that I think this topic can sometimes get a little bit lost, and it's understandable.
Right. Now, another thing that Chris Mellon had mentioned with me, and I wrote up in that Den of Geek article about Unidentified, is one tool that, one way that Unidentified is being used and is that you're able to highlight cases. In other words, to demonstrate that, hey, now that the sissy, as you call them, is asking for these reports, we know there's a lot out there that better be in those reports, that you can't kind of, like a term that I used in one of my articles, gaslight us and pretend like there's not much there. We know there's a lot there. Are you hopeful that they will, be open with the public as they should?
I am hopeful. I think that at least the people that I know on those committees are honest individuals, or patriots. They've been serving the American public for years, if not decades. They're not there to obfuscate. They're not there to hide information. Now there is an element of politics, that is always prevalent because you're talking about an organization by nature that is full of politicians, right? But politicians are only going to do as much as they feel that their constituency, the people that they represent, will allow them to do. Because remember, their job is to eventually, do what they do and then get reelected, right? Otherwise, they're not very effective if they don't get reelected. So reelection is very important for them. And I think if the American public and their constituency tells them, look, it's okay to look at this, right? I mean, I can get on social media now and I see comments were saying, just in a recent interview I did, some of the comments coming in said, why are you wasting time and money and our attention on this dumb topic? Let's get back to what's important, right? That's not helpful because as long as you have that mentality and you're beating up our elected officials for even looking at this, then we're going to be back to where we were even 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. So I think as long as we encourage our leadership, letting them know it's okay to do this. Senator Harry Reid was an absolute maverick in that regard, didn't give a crap about what anybody thought. And he just did it, right? Him and Stevens and Inouye and, Senator John Glenn. These are incredible patriots for our country. Now, whether politics aside, I don't care if you're conservative or liberal or independent or whatever. The bottom line is these people put their political careers on the line to do what they felt was right for the American people. And I think that is exactly the type of people like Senator Marco Rubio. This is an individual. He and I both attended University of Miami way back when. He's obviously he's weathered much better than I have. But this is an individual who's coming up for reelection, and he's willing to take on a topic like this that's fraught with potential political landmines. I think we're seeing a shift, and I think history will look back and ultimately remember these individuals very fondly.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the topics that was brought up recently in the New York Times, and I know you've spoken about this a little bit on Fox News, and I've asked you about this a couple of times, is the topic of UFO crashes. And the way the New York Times framed it is that a couple of you at TTSA, or at least a few, are convinced that this is a reality, that this is something that's happened. First of all, is that framing accurate? And, is that topic kind of been raised also as a check for these reports that, hey, if there is something out there on this topic, we want you all to share that information as well?
So let me go back to the original statement about there's people that, in our organization that are convinced. And we've said this before, there's a fundamental difference between what someone believes, what someone thinks, and what someone knows, right? So I don't ever want to cross that barrier of what I think. In fact, the few times I've been pushed, to a corner on this question, I've tried very diligently to deflect, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what Luis Elizondo thinks or believes. What matters is what the data shows. What do we have? Empirical data evidence that can speak for itself. Now, we know that this planet we live on, Earth, is visited by extraterrestrials all the time. Now, wait, before I go down that road, people say, oh my God, Lou's saying aliens. We have meteorites and we have debris from comets on a daily basis coming in, re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, getting caught in Earth's gravity, coming in and plopping down here, sometimes in people's living rooms, believe it or not, right? So this is the universe is not static. It is dynamic. It is always changing. Things are always happening. And so the question is, are some of these things that are found here on this planet engineered? Are they, let's go the step beyond. Is it possible that some of these things that have been found that we know are not from this planet, are they natural occurring things such as, meteorites and whatnot, meteoroids, or are these something that had some sort of intelligence behind them, if you will, in their design and their function? So that's the question. And the bottom line is we're still trying to answer that question. Yes, I'm obviously deflecting your question here in the politest way possible. But I'm always very careful to stipulate what I think. Look, the internet and social media is full of people of espousing what they think. And at the end of the day, I think most Americans are probably tired about what other people think. Let's try to focus on the areas we don't know yet, and let's try to provide information and data and evidence that can help us answer some of these questions. Um, and I think
Mhm.
only until we get more data would I be more comfortable providing my thoughts. Uh, I don't want to prejudice the jury, if that makes sense. Remember, my job is very simple: collect the truth, speak the truth. Doesn't matter at the end of the day what the hell Lou Elizondo thinks or believes. What matters is what the data shows. So by collecting this
Mhm.
information and presenting it before you're the jury. What matters is what you think, not me. It's you. It's really all about you guys. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to provide you the
Mhm.
evidence. At the end of the day, say, here's the evidence. Here's what the science is telling us. Over to you.
Mhm. No, I appreciate the answer, and I'm happy to give you the opportunity to answer more fully, because typically, you've got a second for a soundbite, and those can get interpreted in many different ways. So it's great to hear a clarification. And then one last question on this topic. Just Davis had brought up at least Roswell, and I think the Aztec case. Or there's a couple cases he believes there are some weight to, that there may be something to them. I'll put it that way. Are there, as far as are there stronger cases? Are there some cases out there that are strong, in your mind, or have you looked into those
Yeah.
really deeply?
Uh,
Hmm.
yeah. I mean, let's face it. It's like doing a criminal investigation. There's a reason why sometimes hearsay isn't even admissible in court, because it's he said, she said, right? Then you get,
Hmm.
you know, secondhand account. I know this occurred because uh, X, Y, and Z. Then you have a firsthand account, right? An eyewitness. I actually saw the car accident myself. This car was traveling this direction. This one was traveling this direction, and they had an accident, right? And then you have, so there's different levels of if you will, information that's more and more credible. Ultimately, can you imagine, let's say you're at a traffic court and someone says, yes, I actually saw this white car Toyota hit this red car Chevy. In fact, it was a Toyota that was doing excessive speed. In fact, here is the radar return from the police officer who just radared them 2 blocks before. They were doing 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. By the way, here is the crash report. Here is a piece of the fender that came off of the Toyota, and you can see, based upon the forces and the impact, it deformed the front bumper to this amount of degrees. And so that's really what we're trying to do here. We're trying to build a case based upon the very best evidence we have available to us at the time, if that makes sense.
Hmm. It does. And getting into unidentified, moving on to another topic, you had mentioned skeptics, and you all tackled a couple topics in the latest unidentified, in that there are other reasons than the search for aliens that you want to look at unidentifieds. In fact, Adam Kehoe wrote a great article kind of outlining this based on that episode. In that, and I've seen this and written about this in the past, it seems that when something gets labeled a UFO, there's a blind spot when it comes to the military, and they won't look at those cases. And some of those cases could demonstrate that there are advanced technologies that some of our adversaries have developed, yet we're hands off because of the taboo. So it seems like, something that is getting missed is that it's great and it's sexy to talk about aliens, but there are other important reasons why UAPs need to be taken seriously and looked at, carefully.
Right. We've always realized the dual use nature of technology. Let's look at the microwave oven that most people now have in their kitchen settings, and quite frankly, we take for granted. The microwave oven was really invented as a result of military technology, radar technology. And people realized, particularly some soldiers in the field, that when they had deployed a radar unit, a field radar unit, to detect then Soviet aircraft, they could put their meal right behind the radar dish, and it would warm up their food, right? And of course, now we have microwave ovens. That's why they used to be called a radar range, actually, in the beginning. From my understanding, that's where the microwave was actually called a radar range, because it was using radar waves initially. So it's not surprising that if you develop a capability to detect, you're building this capability to look at UFOs or UAPs, right? Doing hypersonic velocities, instantaneous acceleration. Well, there are some rational reasons why you'd want to continue to develop this technology. Forget about the UFOs entirely. Let's just look at the fact that you have now Russia and some of our foreign adversaries developing hypersonic cruise missiles, right? New technology that in some way mimics to some degree some of the observables. So if you're looking for a UFO or a UAP traveling at hypersonic velocities, well, intercontinental ballistic missiles travel at that speed, right? Hypersonic glide vehicles. There's all sorts of different things out there that could mimic that behavior. There are missiles that are extremely maneuverable, surface to air missiles that appear to have this almost a sudden and instantaneous characteristic of acceleration. So I guess my point is that this isn't a one-trick pony. If you spend taxpayer dollars trying to identify UAP, there's a really good chance that you may be able to track other things as well. And by the way, in air safety, we saw in one of the episodes, this is not just relegated to military aircraft. There are indeed civilian aircraft that are coming up close and personal to these things, where you've got 250 people in the back of the plane drinking cocktails that are completely unaware. That is a flight safety issue. I don't want myself or my family in an airplane if I don't have complete air domain awareness of what's around me. If the pilot does not know what's above him, below him, or her, or to their sides, that's a problem for me. And so if there's technology out there that we can develop that can assist in some of those areas, I think it's worth pursuing.
Another topic that you brought up that I think is really important, and of course I've shared my research with you on this gentleman, Richard Doty, who claims to have put out some disinformation on this topic. And then you all had Bill Chalker talking about how he had also heard that there were programs like this. It seems important in order to, tell the signal from the noise, essentially, that we need to pay attention to that possibility and what information out there could have been, used to cover up other Black projects, and that it's a topic we need to be cognizant of.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's not uncommon that if you have a super secret aircraft you're trying to keep from public knowledge, all of a sudden it crashes during a test crash. Is it that uncommon to go and put pieces of an airplane or even a car at the wreck site to try to confuse somebody, so maybe they don't know what type of aircraft you're testing or what type of technology, right? If you will, seed the area. So you don't know the difference between a piece of an aileron to some super secret aircraft and a bolt from a 1966 Chevy, right? It's all together, so it doesn't make any sense. Yeah, I mean, there's reasons why you'd want to confuse people sometimes if you're dealing with, and this is, by the way, I'm not talking about extra, I'm talking terrestrial technology, advanced terrestrial technology, right? You don't even have to talk about UAPs. We can just talk about, real world secret technology we're working on now.
Because we've only got about 10 minutes left, we'll move on to some other topics as well. So I wrote an article recently that kind of outlining the Department of Defense's responses ever since you came out, essentially with your claims fortunately backed up by some of your coworkers and colleagues, such as Harry Reid, the senator who helped fund and start the program, a couple of the contractors like Drs. Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis, which in my mind, and I think in many people's minds, including the New York Times and Politico, really solidified the credibility to some of your statements. However, regardless of all of kind of this backing that you had from firsthand witnesses, the DoD has kind of countered many of your claims and your colleagues' claims, Harry Reid's as well, which has been very odd, especially when you put them all together. I felt like when I read that article that they just kept backtracking, changing their story, seemingly just for some reason, just dead set against, accepting or wanting to verify many of the statements that you had made. And even claiming that you had nothing to do with ATIP, it just seems really odd that they had been doing that. Do you have any idea why?
I think that's a question you probably want to ask the department. When you look at this so far in the last 3 years, they've changed their position literally 7 times already, and they continue to change it and evolve it every day. I have some speculation why this may be, but also every time they change their position, eventually they come back around to admitting, but let's not forget it. Initially, it was ATIP didn't exist. Then it was okay, ATIP existed, but it didn't look at UFOs. Oh, well, actually, ATIP did look at UFOs, but didn't find anything. Oh, except for that there were these DIRDs that came out. Well, it was defunct. Well, and this constant backpedaling, and it's only really by a few. There are individuals and there's documentation out there that will come to light. For me, it's not a race. I don't really give a damn what people think about me. What's going to happen is that all this is going to come out either way, and there's going to be some people that are going to have to answer some very difficult questions in the U.S. government. Fortunately, we're talking about a small minority of people. Unfortunately, I think they've done a disservice to the department because the department will have to come back again, just like with the videos, and say, yeah, they're real videos, they're UFOs and everything else. I can't help them. I've tried my best. There's individuals that are still part of the program that were associated with AATIP that are not part of the task force. We have reached a critical mass. You're correct. The senator and many, many, many others know exactly who I am and what I was doing. But at the end of the day, Alejandro, it's not about me. I'm not going to. I could have 3 years ago ended this conversation very quickly, and there's some documentation out there that would have just shut this conversation down. But at the same time, we wouldn't be where we are today with this new task force. They probably would have retracted back into their shell and say, okay, we don't want anything more to do with this. Just pay this guy, shut him up, and let's move on to something else. I think we're only here right now because there's been some, on our part anyway, some patience, allowing the department to try to figure out a position that they can take without, save face, without looking like they're incompetent. Which, by the way, I'm not saying they are, because they do their job very well in other areas. And being able to brief leadership about the reality and the nature of this effort. My only warning would be to those who are in the department who still think that they can obfuscate. Your time is coming. I don't know what to tell you. It's at some point here, the American people, you're going to be on one side of history. You're either going to be on the right side or the wrong side. That's it. And I would ask you to choose very wisely what side of history you want to be on.
Well, and I know you say it's not about you, but I would imagine, because it's been a lot of their comments have been focused on you, such as saying that you never were involved with AATIP or those type of things. It had to have an effect, though. I mean, it had to have an effect on your life and your credibility, and perhaps even some of your professional relationships.
Well, of course. I mean, anybody who's served in national security and served their country, last thing they want to do is be in a situation now people are questioning their credibility, their service, their intentions, their loyalty. I mean, it is very difficult. But I also know that the mission is much greater than me. I mean, everything I've ever said for the record has always come to fruition. So either I'm telling the truth or I'm the greatest psychic the world has ever seen today, and I'm in the wrong business. So I think people are smarter than that. I think people realize that when you look at all the data here and you say, okay, this is what has been said and this is what has occurred versus what the other side has said and not done, or vice versa. I think it's pretty clear. I don't need to spend a whole lot of time defending myself because, quite frankly, the facts are there and they defend me for me. There are some individuals in the journalistic world who unfortunately, I don't think the American public is savvy enough to recognize that they're not real journalists, and so they put out these hit pieces without any real data and information. And of course, they're never held accountable, even though years later, months later, new information comes to light saying, "Oh, okay, this actually was the real case." Those reporters will never go back on what they wrote and say, "Oh, hey, we're sorry, we were wrong, I was inaccurate," and that's a shame, because I think the world of journalism today is not what it used to be even 10 years ago. There's no accountability. Anybody can be a journalist at this point and say whatever the heck they want to be, say whatever the heck they want to say, and there's no accountability, right? I can say I'm a journalist. I want to be a journalist, and therefore now I'm an investigative journalist, but not really. You know, just because I wear a badge doesn't necessarily mean I'm a police officer, right? I can buy a badge at any pawn shop and stick it on me, but it doesn't
Mm.
necessarily mean I'm a law enforcement officer.
If they continue along these lines of, you know, putting out information that seems obviously contrary to the facts that are out there that you all have shared and established, do you have recourse, or are you considering any sort of further recourse?
Yeah, I always have recourse, Alejandro. I mean, I've spent a career looking at and third order cause and effects. So, you know, people's patience only lasts for so long. Um, but I still am a firm believer that we need to try to do things the right way and the least intrusive way. I'd rather entice somebody with a carrot than a stick. You know, like they say,
Hmm.
honey attracts more than vinegar. So more flies. So yes, I have recourse, and you know I always have some options available to me. But I'm not sure we're at that point yet. I don't know. Maybe we are. You know, it depends on what the department does or says within the next few weeks or months. Uh, you know, that ball's in their court, really.
Hmm. And I guess a stick would be legal recourse potentially.
Sure, I mean that's an option, right? I mean, and if you
Hmm.
go legal recourse, what happens? Well, everything's put on the table, and I'm sure
Hmm.
there's going to be some people really uncomfortable should that have to happen. So you know,
Hmm.
again,
Well,
I
the
don't want to go
fortunate
too
thing,
far down the road. Go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say the fortunate thing that I think your patience early on made people question, you know, why isn't he fighting for himself? However, I think it's borne out that your patience actually uh, played well and now has really demonstrated your credibility, um, uh, and has helped in the long run to see that, hey, he was just being patient, you know, letting the facts all demonstrate that it will all work out, and it did. I mean, for the most part. I mean, you've been vindicated. I mean, for you left because they weren't taking the topic seriously enough in the Pentagon. You demonstrated, you and Chris in the group have demonstrated it was a real issue, and you've proven that the American people and the Senate should have been given this information, wanted this information, and that they are now saying, "Hey, we need more."
You know, and on August 4th, you had the Deputy Secretary of Defense authorize under his authorities the establishment of this task force. This is precisely what we have been trying to achieve when I was an ATIP. Finally, getting somebody in a senior level position to accept this responsibility and fund it properly and give it the teeth it needs to do what it needs to do. Right. So it took 3 years. I'm not sure had we have used a different strategy, we would be here, but we've come a long way in just 3 years, I think.
Hmm.
And you know, I do. I think that strategy has, up till now, has proven very effective. Right, rather than confronting the department head on, maybe what we can do is help them. Right, come to a better conclusion.
Hmm. We're pretty much out of time. I know you've got to leave. Just one last yes or no question, and perhaps if you allow, maybe I'll email you some more questions. There was at least a couple that came up in the chat, but this current UAP task force, although Susan Go's press release said that it was started on August 4th. It appears as though, because you know it's Navy related, it stems from you used to work on, that this is the group that was the extension of ATIP that continued on that you've been talking about over the years. Is that correct?
Um,
Not as simple as a yes or no answer. Huh?
there are. I think you're on the right track. I'll
Okay.
just say that. I don't want to answer on behalf of the department. Again, I want to give them some time
Okay.
to figure out the answer they want to give. Um, but I think it's abundantly clear at this point that a lot of the elements that were involved in the ATIP program are part of this current effort. Now, is that by
Hmm.
coincidence or is that by design? You tell me.
Right. And yeah, I found it surprising when I put together my article just how closely your comments and descriptions of this organization and theirs meld in that, you know, talks about same department, same players, all of that. So I found that really interesting and credible for supporting your stance. But we
Yeah.
are out of time. It's 10:35, so I think you've got to run. But thank you so much for joining. Congratulations on a great show, and congratulations on, I can't imagine a better vindication in that, you know, now the Senate is asking questions. There's this new task force. I think people are just floored at this point.
Well, I appreciate it, Alejandro, but really, again, this has been a team effort. Everybody is part of TTSA, and of course, folks like you that are just relentless in finding the truth and getting that information out has been incredibly useful. There are people now in Congress that are paying attention. They're watching social media. There are a couple people now in the Twitter sphere, so to speak, that seem to have a pretty good understanding of what's at stake here. And I think they'd be surprised to know that there's people in very high levels of government that are actually following some of what they have to post. So this has been a group
Mhm.
effort. It's been a sincere honor and pleasure, as always, to be with you. And thank you for all that you do as well, and your listeners and those individuals that are supporting you and people like you. I think the times are changing. I think the times are changing, and I think we're entering potentially a new era of understanding.
Mm. Well, thank you very much. And of course, thank you from all of us on your work on all of this. But thank you very much for joining us. And hopefully, we'll talk to you soon.
Honor and a pleasure as always. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. So thank you to Lou so much for joining us. It was really helpful to be able to talk to him about all of this. And what I will do, like he said, he'll answer more questions via email. So send me emails if you have other questions. I'll take these questions in the chat and I'll put those into an email, and then I'll put together a Q&A because I actually had a couple more too. So otherwise, for those of you who are watching now, just so you know how this works, is that if you are a Patreon member, this video won't be able to be viewable except for those who are in the memberships for YouTube. And I'll post a new video for all of you in Patreon who are members so you can watch it as well. And of course, if you go to openminds.tv, you can see all these articles that we talked about, and you can see links to all of these interviews that we've got going on. So thank you all so much for joining. And until next time, we'll talk to you later. Thanks, guys.